Today we will take a closer look at China's relations with North and South Korea, particularly in recent years, and the possible effect it has on negotiations to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. Both President Xi Jinping of China and Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea assumed power in their respective countries within several months of each other. China's approach towards the Korean Peninsula during the past couple of decades has focused on the three no's: no war, no instability, no nuclear weapons. However, as North Korea continued with more nuclear and long-range ballistic missile launches, China has been perceived to slowly move away from its supposed lips and teeth ally by supporting one United Nations resolution after another to impose harsher economic sanctions on the DPRK. China also appears to have finally taken sanctions enforcement more seriously after the last series of UN Security Council resolutions that tightened the economic noose around North Korea, with a significant decline in official merchandise trade between the PRC and the DPRK, particularly in the dramatic drop of North Korean exports to China, which you can see in the chart that we prepared here at KEI using customs data from China. There was also a debate last year within the scholarly community in China on how to deal with the North Korea nuclear issue. One group of experts even argued for severing ties with North Korea, something that would have been unheard of a few years ago. And when war rhetoric heated up last year, China intimated that if North Korea initiated kinetic conflict, the PRC would not defend North Korea and stay neutral in the fight. However, last January's New Year's speech by Kim Jong-un opened the door to peaceful dialogue and launched a series of bilateral meetings between adversaries, and also 3 North Korea-China summits in a relatively short succession. Now China's relations with North Korea appear to be reverting back to the past strategy. But is that really accurate? Has China's strategy on the Korean Peninsula been relatively consistent all along? Were the perceived changes that I outlined above wishful thinking on behalf of the United States? So we are fortunate to have with us today Dr. Seong-hyon, Director of the Center for Chinese Studies and Department of Unification Strategy at the Sejong Institute, to shed some light and bring deeper understanding of China's 2018 strategy towards the Korean Peninsula. You have his full biography before you, so I will not repeat it. Because of our limited time, and we started a little bit late. So I also want to give full time for Q&A from the audience. So with that, Dr. Lee, please come up.
I understand you, why you are here today. I completely understand you. Free lunch. See? I see through you. The world told you there is no such thing as free lunch, but you defy the world. You defy the common sense. And you came and you got the free lunch. So, we are starting a new path in your life. I don't mean this to be a complex story, but this is a very complex story. And we have only like half an hour and a Q&A. So my strategy today is to make the complex story very simple. Very simple. So, and then I look forward to Q&A first so I can learn from you. And I also assume that there are some Chinese colleagues here. Please raise your hand if there's anyone from. Good, just 2? Okay. So you also got free lunch. So this is an equal opportunity organization. We don't discriminate based on your nationality. But your task today is to correct me if I'm wrong. Okay? So this is more like a group, workshop for us to have a better understanding. And when I misspeak about, your country's strategy, you should correct me so I can learn, or so we all can learn from you as well. We can teach each other. So, people will ask you when you go back to your office this afternoon, you went there, KEI, so what the talk was about, other than getting the free lunch. And I already prepared answer for you, politically correct answers, so you won't be embarrassed. So you can tell them it was about love. It was about love between North Korea and China. China loved North Korea, but North Korea loved America more. That's the problem. And it was about fear. China feared about the rapid improvement for the last few months. Rapid improvement of relationship between EPRK and the United States. China feared about being sidelined from the drama, which it used to run, it used to be the main actor, but now there is another actor, America. So what this will head to? Uncertainty. Uncertainty, okay? So it's very simple. It was about love, fear, and certainty. Yeah. Practice makes perfect, so we'll practice. So what this talk is about?
Love, fear, uncertainty.
So, then how we'll deal with this issue? Then I also prepared an answer for you. The answer is the Starbucks. You should tell them that they should send me a Starbucks coupon. And upon my confirmation of the Starbucks coupon, then I'll send you the answer. So that's the deal. Okay? So very simple. It was about love, fear, and uncertainty. And if you want to know the answer, send me the Starbucks coupon. Makes your life simple. Okay? Is it a good deal? Everyone is talking about whether North Korea's strategy this time has really changed or not in terms of its denuclearization. Perhaps I could approach this issue from another angle, that is from American perspective. Because we always talk about, whether North Korea is serious or sincere about denuclearization, but that's only half of the story. It takes two to tango, and North Korea's decision didn't happen out of the vacuum, because there is some environment that also created or motivated North Korea or influenced. And I'll approach it from the Chinese angle. There is a story in U.S. policy community. When it comes to North Korean issue, the answer used to be the strategic patience. I don't do nothing. It's China's job to solve the North Korean nuclear issue. Strategic patience. Trump, when he became the president, he said that North Korea is China's problem to fix. As if all the roads lead to Rome, the North Korean nuclear issue has to go through China, the gateway for all the miracles about things happening about North Korea. But this paradigm suddenly shifted. And in March, when Trump declared that he would hold a summit with Kim Jong-un, from those sitting in Beijing, it sent us a different signal, because Beijing perceives it from its own perspective. Namely, the U.S. does not need China to reach out to North Korea. The U.S. does not need the help of China, because Trump himself can solve the North Korean issue. That's a different approach. The demise of strategic patience. If that is the case, then China is no longer the main player in this game. What that also means is that China's strategic leverage, influence in the geopolitics surrounding Korean Peninsula will decrease. So what is China's response? In the mere span of just a few months, Xi Jinping staged 3 surprise summits with Kim Jong-un, as if to display North Korea is still my game. I own the North Korean issue. I have more leverage and influence in North Korea. And if you want to see the evidence, how many times I met with Kim Jong-un? 3 times. It's like Xi Jinping is meeting with Kim Jong-un every month. March, April, May. And interestingly, as Phil just mentioned, it also has a very subtle impact on China's strategic shift of China's priorities. It's a strategy about North Korea. As Phil mentioned, traditionally, China's principles when it deals with North Korea has 3 components. 1, China does not want war on the Korean Peninsula. Second, the North Korean issues should be resolved through dialogue and negotiation, not through military actions. Okay? Number 3, yes, China also wants denuclearization. What's the change? Nothing changed. The 3 components are still there. But under the surface, there is some psychology working. And that is that as China having the sense of being sidelined from the drama of North Korea's denuclearization negotiation with the United States, China felt that I need to secure my influence on North Korea more than ever. You see? And, well, denuclearization is still important, but now I have a more urgent priority. I need to maintain my influence on North Korea so that I could have my geopolitical standing in East Asia. And this has a very interesting dynamics about how China will behave when it is dealing with the North Korean drama, including the question about whether China is seriously implementing its UN sanctions against North Korea or not. Yeah? And it was China's reaction, a very natural reaction actually, very natural reaction, when it sensed that the possibility of resolving North Korean issue was increasingly driven by the initiatives of the United States and also Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president, mediator, not China. Very natural reaction. But then, it's very interesting. China is more eager to have its presence known, felt, when it comes to North Korean drama, but relatively for the last few months, China strangely has been very reticent, very quiet, very quiet. China even complained that, I want to be included in the process of declaring the end of the Korean War. I must be included, right? And Chinese foreign minister said China should play an active role in the Korean Peninsula issue. China really reacted, but then when it comes to the actions, China has been relatively quiet for the last few months while the drama has been unfolding, as if China is just watching the drama from the sidelines. Very interesting. Very interesting. China wants to be at the center of the drama, but then China is not at the center. China is watching from the sidelines as if it's a spectator. Very interesting. Why? There are two theories already circulating in the policy market. One, it's because Trump sent a warning to Xi Jinping, right? Trump already complained at least 3 times publicly that Xi Jinping is behind North Korea in terms of North Korea's negotiation with the United States, because Trump noticed that whenever Kim Jong-un meets with Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un's attitude became much more defiant and uncooperative. So Trump scratching his head that maybe Xi Jinping is behind and he's pulling the strings. And maybe, Xi Jinping is telling Kim Jong-un, hey boy, slow down the process. Okay? This is, Xi Jinping, is behind, so this is theory that coming from the highest leadership of America, presidential level. So let's call it presidential theory. Number 2 is more like a scholarly academic speculation. It's because it's about influence. And China used to have a lot of influence in North Korea, but these days, maybe China really lost its relative influence on North Korea, particularly because the drama is initiated and run by Washington, Donald Trump. So it's because China's influence in North Korea has decreased. Which one is correct? The answer is
First one.
first one. The answer is what was the first one?
I was recording this.
See? The enemy, you never know when your enemy attacks you, ambushes you. So you should always on alert, right? A good instructor always asks you ambush question. Don't be nervous. I won't ask any question. Peace be with you. When I was told that he just got nervous. So enjoy your lunch. There is a free lunch. Don't forget it's KEI. Did you donate some money to KEI? So next year, please put your name on the KEI donors list. And don't forget Starbucks coupon. Where was that? The answer is number 3. The answer is number 3. Both are wrong. China has been relatively quiet because things are, in the bigger scheme of things are moving in the overall direction of China's own interests. When things are, unfolding the way I want it, why should I interfere, giving the impression that I'm a spoiler of the party? Why should I draw the accusation from Trump? Because last year we were talking about war on the Korean Peninsula. This year we are talking about peace on the Korean Peninsula. What a change. China wants no war, as Philip mentioned. No war, right? So it's the China's national interest. And what's happening between Trump and Kim Jong-un these days? Negotiation, not military option, not bloody nose. So, number 2, things are happening through dialogue and negotiation. 对话和谈判, right? Not military option. Number 2, according to China's wishes. Number 3, see what will be the ultimate outcome of this negotiation between Trump and Kim Jong-un? Denuclearization. See, it also fits nicely China's overall strategy and the game. So everything is flowing very beautifully the way China loves to see. Okay? It's just that China is not the main actor. Trump is doing all the show, But then China said that, I'm not the main actor, but it's okay. Things are going in the direction I wanted. That Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize or whatever. Plus, now North Korea and United States, there is some sensitive negotiation in an item that is the end of war declaration, which will also lead to the possible peace treaty, right? And this is also China loves to have as well. Why? When there is an end of war declaration and peace treaty, what the result of that is, what will be the, I want to ask you, what will be the outcome of the peace treaty? Yes, the answer is peace. When there is a peace treaty, then there will be peace. See? I'm not asking difficult question. My question already includes the answer to make your life simple. So, when there is a peace treaty, then there will be peace. The problem is that the United States has been justifying its presence of U.S. military in South Korea due to the North Korean threat. But when there is a peace treaty, that means that there is a peace. That means that there is no threat from North Korea, right? And China will ask a very logical question. Hey, Trump, now there is a peace. There is no tension on the Korean Peninsula. And why you still wish to have its military on the Korean Peninsula? Do you mind getting out from the playground? Why? China has been very nervous presence of U.S. troops in its vicinity. Probably you notice that whenever there is a joint military drills between South Korea and the United States, it's not North Korea just, but China always angrily reacts to it because there are a lot of bombs or military helicopters, strategic bombers, all the backyard of Chinese territory. China gets very nervous about it. So it will potentially give a very nice logical basis for China to pressure the United States. Do you mind getting out from East Asia? That will naturally lead to the reduction of U.S. power projection in Northeast Asia. They will also open up more room for China to act. And China's geopolitical standing will naturally rise while the U.S. presence will decrease. And China loves to have that, particularly in East Asia. In 2013, there was a summit in California between Xi Jinping and Obama, right? And the Sunnylands agreement. And at the end of the meeting, Xi Jinping suggested to Obama, the Pacific Ocean is big enough to hold both United States and China together. What that means is that, it's big, so let's draw a line in the middle, and I'll have the half of Pacific, the East Asian part, and I'll take care of this part, and you take care of the other part, Atlantic and all these other parts. So you have your game, and I'll have my game, and I don't interfere, you don't interfere me, okay? Because the game is big enough, and we don't have to fight each other. And that's called the new type of major power relations that proposed by Xi Jinping, 新型大国关系, right? So all the things are moving along in a way that China wants. You hear this for the first time, right? Because I'm the very good. It's a KI. So, finally, I told you I'll make it very simple. The policy implication, the question at the end of this very complex but very simplified in the presentation is that whether China will cooperate with the United States or North Korean issue, right? This is something that has policy implications. When the picture becomes much more complex, because now the dynamics between U.S. and China, in the past it was half cooperation and half competition, but now it's clearly moving toward in the direction of more and more competition, more and more rivalry, more and more mistrust, more and more power gain rivalry, right? More and more hegemonic rivalry for leadership, particularly in East Asia. And as a social scientist, my first order of hypothesis is that China will naturally pursue its national interest, and China's actions will reflect its perceived national interest. Okay? This is my first order of analysis and approaching. China will act in accordance to its national interest. And this, I think we should know something about China's strategy, particularly this strongman Xi Jinping. I mean, he is an amazing figure. I lived in China for 11 years. I lived the entire Hu Jintao period, so I'm a Hu Jintao boy. When I went there, Hu Jintao just became the leader. And when I was still there, Hu Jintao stepped down. And when I was still there, Xi Jinping became the leader. Everyone thought Xi Jinping would turn out to be a so-so leader, including the WikiLeaks. He is a moderate, his temperament is moderate, or manageable, or willing to cooperate with the West. His daughter studying at Harvard University, spent some time in Iowa, which is my second home to me as well. In the middle of nowhere, Iowa. Speaking of Iowa, my mom always gets confused between Iowa and Ohio. My son went to school in Ohio. Mom, it's not Ohio, it's Iowa. Oh yes, it's Ohio. I gave up trying to change my mom. For her, Ohio and Iowa is the same thing. And I cannot change her universe. I cannot change her worldview. Probably it's the same. Like a destiny. I mean, there's something really special about Xi Jinping. Really, he is someone, I have the feeling that, who feels huge, tremendous historical responsibility right on his shoulders. And his mission is to revive the great Chinese civilization, the glory of China in this 21st century. Just like the Qing dynasty, when China took 30 to 40% of the world's wealth. He wants to recreate the rejuvenate the glory of China. And he is someone that this is the right time, because he really sensed that we are at the crossroads of the rise of China, a strategic opportunity. And he has this lofty goal to realize that. And this ambition, sense of opportunity for rise of China has been emboldened by none other than your president, Trump. Trump imbued his sense of opportunity for China. Because Trump is a political novice, a TV celebrity, and who suddenly, out of the blue, became the president of the world's greatest power. In China, it took, including Xi Jinping, at least 30 years, a leader groomed from the local provinces he has to go through different roles. Xi Jinping went through the Shanghai, Zhejiang, and also what's that the other Taiwan? Fujian, right? Good, you are the teacher. So it took 30 years for Xi Jinping to get all the training to finally have the crown of the Middle Kingdom. And Xi Jinping is scratching his head that, which system is better? China, it takes 30 years for a leader who is grooming to be a leader to be tested again, and finally given the opportunity to run the country. But look at the United States. Suddenly a guy like Trump became a president of the United States. Wow, that's laughable in a way. So the sense of superiority of the political systems for the first time in the complex relations between China and the US. It's always, China always in the past emphasized, you need to have you need to have a confidence in your own political system, because China always lacked the confidence in the communist system compared to the United States. Right? 自主之心, you need to have the 自主之心always emphasized. You need to have confidence in the socialist system because this is a great system. Why they emphasize? Because they don't have the confidence. So they try to tell students to memorize, the socialist is a great system. But this theory became a reality when Trump became the president of the United States. Now, see, we really have a great system compared to the America. And Chinese leader Xi Jinping also went to Davos and became very interesting. He preached the virtue of globalization. I mean, this used to be the darling of the preaching of United States. But Xi Jinping preached globalization, and Trump preached isolationism. And all other stuff, as you know, global infrastructure projects and financial system according to Chinese needs, AIIB, Belt and Road Initiative, and also very interestingly, we already used to call China a continental power. But in 2014, China announced that now we are maritime power. 海洋大国. That means that China is not only just a continental power, now the ocean is also our playground as well. And the size of China's ambition is not just limited to Asia, but goes beyond. Now it reaches to African countries as well. In just last month in September, Xi Jinping, invited all the African leaders to Beijing and hold the African summit, which they've been doing. It's not just the first time; they've been doing it for several years before. So the size and scope and boundary of China's sense of sphere of influence is really expanding these days. And it all boils down to the dream of rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation, 中华民族伟大复兴的梦. The great rejuvenation of China's dream. And it's not just theory. When I came to Washington 2 days ago, we talked about whether Trump administration has a roadmap for North Korea's denuclearization. They didn't have. But China clearly has the ambition that comes with a plan, very concrete plan. And it has many details, but to make the story simple, by the year 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of PRC, it wants to build a country that is as prosperous economically with Western developed countries and as strong militarily on par with the United States. And to make the story simple, 2049, but now we are hearing 2050. It's easy to remember. used to be originally 2049, but you know, the 19th Party Congress, they just call it and make it simple, 2050. That's the year when China, 2050 is the year when China, and this is something that when you ask your Communist Party friend, so what does it mean? And his answer was that is the year when we Chinese surpass those Americans. And China has this strategic sense that we already talked about, you know, China's rise. China's sense is that we already complete the rising part. It already risen. So don't talk about rising of China. It has already risen. Now it's time to make this country strong. They're talking about, you know, strong military, strong nation, right? Jianggo. And strong nations, you know, dream, Jianggo Meng, that rivals the steering power of the United States. And there is one element that I want to draw your attention. That is that there is a particular expression called, you know, co-interest. Co-interest. 核心利益. And this is the jargon used by the CCP that this is a national interest that is so important to the degree that it decides almost the life and death of the destiny of the China, the country, that there is no room for compromise. 核心利益. And Xi Jinping publicly made and emphasized already several times. And one important aspect is that the concept of 核心利益, you know, co-interest, there is also an abstract aspect that is called China has the right to develop its nation. You know, right for development. And what that means is that when another country tries to obstruct China's effort to develop its economy, national development, then China will not compromise. China has the legitimate right to development. And this is, I think, a very, it opens room for conflict between the United States and China, because China has for example, made in 2025 projects that is upgrade China's industrial projects, you know, to the level of advanced countries. Biotechnology, artificial intelligence, aerospace, big data. This is not the projects for developing countries. These are the projects that U.S. is actually, you know, dominating, leading, but China is joining and competing with the United States. And if U.S. tries to obstruct it, then China will not compromise. At least if you look at the official statements about what the core interest defines. And going back to the Korean Peninsula issue, amid deepening rivalry and suspicion and competition for leadership in the Asia-Pacific region, and there has been so much accumulated miscommunication and mistrust between China and the United States. Now, I think China had reached a stage where it suspects that the U.S. will try to contain China, particularly the Trump administration, regardless of whether China cooperates with America or not on the North Korean issue. In the past, North Korean issue used to be the symbol of cooperation between U.S. and China strategy, because in all other areas they disagree each other. But China also wants denuclearization. America wants denuclearization. If you go back to the 2013 Sunnyland officially, the most impressed agreement is that they cooperate each other on North Korean issue. So it's a symbol of North Korea used to be the very prominent area of symbol of cooperation between US and China. Now we are getting past that myth. It's a myth. It's dead. And now if you look at China's CCTV and China's state television, they are calling in a terminal called 中国方案. It means a Chinese solution. What that means is that when it comes to North Korean issue, the American approach of trying to solve the North Korean issue has been a failure. So China will propose its own initiative, alternative solution to the North Korean issue. And it already proposed freeze solution. 双轨并行. Right? So now China is no longer a second most important power. Probably the ambition of size of ambition of China is that increasingly in more areas, China wants to call the shots in many international dramas. And Xi Jinping met with Kim Jong-un 3 times this year, but I think the most interesting part is the third meeting. When Xi Jinping met with Kim Jong-un on June 19, he promised him 3 things. The everlasting friendship between the two countries and the enduring support by the Chinese Communist Party and government to the North Korea. These are just the politically correct statement, but I think the key is the third point. That Xi Jinping said, she will continue to support socialist North Korea. 社会主义朝鲜. And this will never change. China will support North Korea, that is socialist North Korea, and this support will not change. And in media text, we call it 三个不变 or 三个不会变. Right? And this is very interesting because a while ago, Pompeo said that if North Korea denuclearizes, then the United States is willing to help North Korea to become a country on par with South Korea. As you know, South Korea is a moderately prospering democracy, and that has been done primarily by American sponsorship. Okay? And actually, South Korea is a signature success story of democratic transformation in America's foreign engagement history. But, as you know, or at least I know, Xi Jinping is a dedicated socialist and believer in Marxism. And when they had the 100-year anniversary of Marxism, and Xi Jinping publicly declared that China's choice of its development path, China's choice of its development, that is socialist Marxism, based on Marxism, is completely correct. 完全正确. China has always painstakingly resisted accepting the Western development model, and Xi Jinping thinks that, our choice is correct. And where do you see the evidence? Look at Trump's America. That is disintegrating internally. And our socialism is great. I think he is someone who has great confidence about socialism and trying to implement socialism, Marxism, in the 21st century of human civilization. So, even though China, just like the United States, also wants North Korea's denuclearization, their respective visions for the future of North Korea and the type of its political institution may be starkly different when talking about the future of North Korea. Okay, when North Korea denuclearizes and probably the Korean Peninsula will become unified, then does it suit China's own interest? Does it suit America's own national interest? I think that Xi Jinping's vision for the future of North Korea and Trump's vision of the future of North Korea probably not very compatible with each other. And this will unavoidably affect how Xi Jinping will deal with Kim Jong-un and what kind of advice Xi Jinping offers to Kim Jong-un in this ongoing drama of negotiations with the United States. So, finally, forward-looking thoughts. And the important key point is that, number 3, I hope I'm wrong about these predictions. This is very important. This is just my thinking aloud. At this juncture of stage of development of U.S.-China conflict and rivalry, China is unlikely to sacrifice its relations with North Korea by honoring Washington's demands to maintain China's maximum economic pressure on North Korea through sanctions. Particularly, China just recovered its relations with North Korea. You know, for the last several years, the relation between China and North Korea was very bad. They just recovered, right? So China and North Korea, they are also starting a new relationship. And I don't think Xi Jinping wants to sacrifice its relations with North Korea to benefit of what it perceives as American strategic interest. As I mentioned, they just restored the relations. And also, China will think about how it can use its relations with North Korea, its influence on North Korea, as a leverage in its deepening rivalry with the United States for global and particularly the regional leadership rivalry. And I hope I'm wrong. The Q&A. Oh my God. I lied to you. Maybe you don't have time for Q&A. Maybe we should go back to.
What I will do is I will forego my opportunity to ask any questions, and we'll just go straight to the audience. We said we'd get you out of here in about an hour. We started about 10 minutes late, so maybe we'll go 10, 15 minutes for a question. And if you can ask a question and not make a long comment, or just ask your question so we can move along, I appreciate it. We'll go.
Could you just make a few comments about the role you think China can play in North Korea's potential economic opening and development, especially in cooperation or competition with South Korea, Japan, and the United States?
Cooperate competition with South Korea and Japan, not the United States.
So as all those countries think about North Korea's potential economic development, how do you see China managing its role in the process?
For the last few months, China held 3 summits with North Korea, and that's very important development. And on the rubric of that deepening relations, actually China hosted a number of workshops inside China by inviting North Korea's Workers' Party middle-level officials to China's major cities like Xi'an, Dalian, and also Pyongyang, trained them with, educated them about economic development, special economic zones. About 10 days ago in Beijing, Chinese law firm also invited North Korean lawyers to train them about international economy and international contract. So I think it's important for us to note that there is a role, and very positive role, China plays in inducing North Korea, helping North Korea to join the international community. There is really, and objectively speaking, a positive role. And China is the right platform and gateway for North Korea, an isolated country, to gradually join the international community, because China is also a socialist system. So North Korea feels safe by working together with China. I think China becomes much more uneasy. North Korea becomes a little more uneasy when it works with South Korea, even or in the United States, because they already suspect about there must be some ulterior motivation, right? For example, during the Kim Dae-jung period, they applied sunshine policy of engagement to North Korea, and the North Korean apparatus, they suspect that this sunshine policy is a plot to, like, a Trojan horse to undermine the North Korean system. And I think that North Korea feels much more comfortable when China reaches out its hand. Having said that, I think that there, as you alluded, there is some sort of competition structure. When North Korea declares that now we are open for business, then there will be a rush of businessmen from China, South Korea, Japan, Singapore. I was in Taiwan, even Taiwanese businessmen. And they are driven by potential business profits, because North Korea is a virgin territory when it comes to international business. They have very rich, sophisticated labor power, but they are so cheap. And they also have a rich natural resources. So whoever goes there and signs the contracts, I mean, depending on how you do that, I think there is room for potential profits, and the timing, the speed of approach, I think is very important. So in a way, I think each stakeholder is preparing the day when North Korea declares that we are open for business, including, I think, United States as well.
How much is North Korea using the negotiations with the United States, with South Korea, to lessen its dependence on China? Is there a North Korean strategy here about trying to, you mentioned broadening of alliances, relationships. Is there a North Korean strategy to reduce its dependence on China, or is China just too close and too big for that to happen?
I think this is has been an ongoing debate, and there's always a question that North Korea tries to lessen its dependence on China, primarily because it depends so much on China. The latest statistics is that North Korea depends on China in terms of economy like 92%. Yeah, that's a unilateral dependence. So I think it's very natural in a sense that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. I think you want to put different, itemize in different baskets, even when you do investment as well. And North Korea has been, that's why whenever North Korea woos America, that's naturally is interpreted as a North Korean effort to decrease its influence on China. But for this particular juncture, I think North Korea's strategy is more about global strategy. What it means is that North Korea reaches out to the United States, North Korea reaches out to South Korea, North Korea reaches out to China, North Korea, Kim Jong-un will go to Russia soon, and probably Kim Jong-un will also invite Pope Francis, and Kim Jong-un will also meet with Shinzo Abe of Japan. That means that, the way North Korea's scale and size of North Korea is coming out, in a sense, this time, is unprecedented. And this is not just a small gimmick. And this also adds to the argument that perhaps North Korea's strategic shift this time, giving up nuclear weapons, but join the international community, and have a really functional international network of other countries, and then help them, its economy, also getting the security assurance and protection, promise of United States not militarily attacking North Korea. Then I think it also gives a basis and for the argument that the way North Korea is moving, the maneuvers North Korea is making this time is something fundamentally different. Not just a small tactical, more like strategic moves, or big strategic moves.
How about the gentleman? We haven't been on this side yet.
Thank you. My name is Victor Lee, Senior Fellow at the Pro Peace Foundation. And I have a question. Recently, during President Moon's visit in North Korea, talked about unification, right? Some expression that since North Korea has very clear idea of what kind of unification wants, South Korean vision seems not that clear. So what's your understanding? What type of unification does two leaders can come reach an agreement? And then what will be China's view on that? Whether we agree what China can do for that, or if we're against what China will do.
Oh, that's really a big question. Put it in a very disguisingly simplistic way. How dare you asking such a complex question? Well, I think maybe South Korea as a whole, because it's a democracy and there is a right wing and left wing and there are noise about what we want. But as in terms of Moon Jae-in government, I think they're very crystal clear about what it wants. I think Moon Jae-in government wants peace first. That means that it's not hurrying to reunify the two systems. I think he wants a state where there is no longer fear of war, no longer armed clashes. They wanted peace and see things from there. So I think they're making a not, people are saying that, Moon Jae-in is too idealistic. I don't think so. The way that Moon Jae-in approaches is very specific. He wants peace, and he wants to be very, strike from a very concrete measure. For example, for the last few weeks, North Korea and South Korea, they have been getting rid of the military mines along the 38th parallel of DMZ, right? These are very specific steps that that North Korea and South Korea are agreeing to do. Instead of talking big things and big picture. So particularly for this Moon Jae-in administration, I don't think they are not really ideological or some. I think they want specific things to be done, and they want concrete measures, actions. And when it comes to China, I think there is a misperception that China is likely to play a spoiler when it comes to unification. I don't think so. I think China wants unification, does not mind unification at all, as long as it is done initially by two Koreas without the interference from a third country, that is United States. and also done in a peaceful manner. Also, unified Korea is not hostile towards China. I think that's just some of the requirements that China set out very clearly in China. So I think as my Chinese colleagues told me, I always asked, is China part of the problem or part of the solution when it comes to North Korean issue? The answer is that sometimes we are part of the problem, sometimes we are part of the solution. I think that's the answer. And depending on how China and United States work together, and when they have a strategic confidence to each other, I think there is a room for China and United States, also South Korea and other regional actors, including Japan and Russia, work together to make this possible.
Okay, let's maybe take last few questions here in rapid form. So maybe you want to. So we got 3 last questions, and
Maybe we should give one opportunity to Chinese national. I think there was Chinese.
Well, Warren, I want to start with your conclusion, and that was that you see that China will try to undercut the U.S. The U.S. is not advocating a socialist change in North Korea. It's advocating denuclearization using maximum pressure. I have a 2-pronged question. The first one is, how much leakage is there across the border now? Is China cooperating to provide counterband to North Korea to sustain it, particularly in energy? And secondly, is it willing to go along with maximum pressure to get denuclearization?
let's go one that was back there. Yes.
Thank you very much. And my question is that, given that there is increasing cooperation between South Korea and North Korea, or at least both sides suggest more like economic integration, do you think under America's pressure and under Trump's saying that without my approval there's nothing going to happen, do you think, what do you think that's going to happen for inter-Korean cooperation, for example, the railway and also the economic rail? Do you think that's going to be happening? And if not, what will you think will be happening? Thank you.
And there was one over there. Yes.
Dr. Lee, you mentioned that China is satisfied with the current peace process, because the U.S. will eventually have to leave the military forces.
Overall satisfied.
Yeah, overall satisfied. But if you look at the Panmunjom Declaration and the inter-Korean negotiations, they never talk about anything about U.S. military forces. And on the contrary, Moon Jae-in has made it very clear that he wants the U.S. military to stay in South Korea. South Korean public opinion polls have very high approval ratings for the U.S. military. And even North Korea, I think, would not be completely comfortable having no U.S. troops, because they might feel a little threatened by China. So do you still think that China is overall satisfied with the current peace process?
Yeah, 3 questions. I'll work to from the last question. For the time being, I think China is a country that really has, South Koreans, we talk about yesterday and today and tomorrow, but China is a country that's talking about, past 5,000 years and today and forward-looking future of 5,000 years. And what that means is that they're really thinking about the big picture, really. When I said that China is satisfied for the time being, I mean, it's present. The overall direction of things happening, as I mentioned, China's interest, the overall development suits China's interest. And I also said that at the beginning there is some uncertainty, right? And uncertainty is not just decided by what China wants, but also the actions, reactions, right? Actions by United States and actions by South Korea and North Korea as well. There is a very interesting, I think even there is a very interesting dynamics, somewhat disagreement between North Korea and China. That is that Kim Jong-un told the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's envoy, Seong-hyon, that peace treaty or declaring the end of the war, which U.S. has been very reluctant. So Kim Jong-un gave the assurance that declaring the end of the war has nothing to do with the withdrawal of U.S. troops from the Korean Peninsula, has nothing to do with to undermine the U.S.-South Korea alliance, just to assure United States. I think China's strategic perspective, I think the basic position is that China doesn't mind the presence of U.S. troops in its vicinity, including South Korea. But then there is also strategy is also undergoing metamorphosis and evolution. What that means is that, as I mentioned, China is transforming from a DNA of a developing country to a strong and powerful country, DNA mindset. In the past, China used to look at the presence of U.S. troops in South Korea as a direct threat to China's security interests, undermining China's security interests. But as China becomes very strong these days and also very confident about this high-tech military power, there is a growing confidence and change of some of the members who are at the Chinese strategic decision-making community that, look, we are very strong right now. We are not weak as it used to be before. South Korea only has about less than 30,000 U.S. soldiers. What should we fear about them? There is change, this is not decisive change, but this incremental, evolutionary, a very subtle change that we need to explore. That means that China does not mind the presence of U.S. troops. There is only less than 30,000 soldiers, and they think that we could deal with that. We have a very huge country, and less than 30,000 countries. I mean, it's not a direct threat. We could deal with them. Besides, China also finds the usefulness of the presence of U.S. troops in the region. It has the role traditionally prevents a conflict between China and its regional rival Japan. And the U.S. troops played such a positive role. So China, for the time being, China continues to see the beauty of that role for the time being. But when it comes to the future, 10 years from now, 20 years old, there's uncertainty, as I mentioned. What was your question?
My question was, what do we think will be happening vis-a-vis the inter-Korean cooperation under pressure?
Yes, I think there is some misunderstanding clearly about what the government attempts to do. As I mentioned, there is a potential opening of the North Korean market. And every player, including South Korea and Taiwan and mainland China, Japan, United States, they are waiting for the day when North Korea declares that we are open for business. So when Moon Jae-in took South Korean businessmen to North Korea, like Samsung, head of Samsung, LG, Hyundai, it doesn't mean that he will let them engage in the business with North Korea right away. That will be a violation of UN sanctions, right? What that means is that Moon Jae-in wants to give an assurance to Kim Jong-un. Look, I'm not empty talking. I'm ready to help you when you denuclearize. And I also brought some evidence. I brought some people. CEO of Samsung, LG, Hyundai. These are people who followed me, and these are people who will help you when you denuclearize. So I think he went there to give some assurance and more confidence, so that lure Kim Jong-un to work towards denuclearization more concrete, taking more concrete measures. And also, I know we understand that U.S. has been frustrated about speed of inter-Korean relations improvement, particularly seeing the inter-Korean relations, including economic relations, much faster than the denuclearization process. And there's also the half of the story is that I think there's also I get the sense I don't know, but I get the sense there's also frustration in Seoul as well, that we analyze and we judge that, North Korea is making a strategic decision to trade off between nuclear weapons for security guarantee and economic development. And it takes two to tango. Time is running up, and U.S. also should not waste its time and get to the game and play its role, and that should be encouraging North Korea to work toward the de-nuclearization in a more, brisk way, instead of, taking time and sitting back and making demands that has been, in a way, that becoming, creating more suspicion, even from North Korean side. Kim Jong-un famously complained openly that, don't let me regret my decision to give up nuclear weapons, when there is a very slow process of concessions coming from U.S. side as well. So I think there's some perceptual gap. The U.S. feels that the concession North Korea has made is very symbolic and not very substantial. But at the same time, North Korea also feels that we made a number of concessions, but the U.S. has been very reluctant to give some concessions that gives us some confidence, that trust to the intention of the United States. And your question was?
First of all, is there a lot of leakage across the border by China allowing the contraband to go in to support the North Korean regime? Will they continue to try to undermine the dialogue over it? Secondly, I don't think the U.S. is advocating that you have to have a change in form of government in North Korea. We're not advocating a socialist change. Indeed, I think your point there is not one thing.
What point?
You made the point that China wants to continue a socialist system in North Korea.
Yes.
I think that would be all right.
Well, that's it's okay for us to have a room for debate. But I'll answer the first question. China is a huge country. Borders with North Korea is 1,440 kilometers. And I traveled for 10 days along the border between South Korea, China and North Korea about 1.5 months ago. I think from the central government, that is Beijing's perspective, I think they are still maintaining the principle of keeping the UN sanctions intact. And part of the motivation, particularly at this stage, is that China wants to also show that it's following the international rules. It's keeping the international standards, while Trump is undermining international standards. So China wants to have particular motivation that it follows international agreements, and it helps China's interest as well. And so the principal stance from Chinese government in Beijing in particular is that the sanctions are intact, even though we have some strategic disagreement with the United States. Having said that, I think local government's perspective in China is, I think, starkly different, because local governments bordering North Korea, like Liaoning, Heilongjiang, Jilin province, these are the three Dongbei province, three northeastern province in China, which has been a traditional economic backwater. China's most prosperous provinces all in the eastern side, or now in the western Chengdu, and where they're starting the Belt and Road project. But it's always the northeastern province that has been behind the economic development. And these province has a geographically, very naturally position to develop its economy, and its obvious partner is North Korea. And when you go to a city like Dandong, which is just across the Yalu River across North Korea, there statistics vary, but about anywhere from 25 to 40% of Dandong residents in China, their basic principal livelihoods depends on trade with North Korea.
So their livelihood depends on, because there's a market and geography determines their livelihoods. And when I went there, I saw a prospering, booming exchange of businesses between North Korea and China. And I think in a way that is very understandable. And the housing prices in Dandong apartments, the prices doubled and tripled. And someone even told me that I should buy apartment in Dandong because the economy will rise, the housing price will rise, and I'll make money. So things are happening. Things are happening. And I think while there is not a political decision to lift sanctions at this moment, but I think people who are like economic animals, they are waiting for the chance, the day when they are allowed to engage economically with North Korea, because they always try to anticipate what will happen in the future.
All right. Thank you very much for a very fascinating discussion today. I apologize for keeping you a little bit over the time limit, but let's give a round of applause for that.